Chapter 284. Using his identity as an embassy staff, the counselor temporarily sent away the Miami police guarding the door. He pushed open the door of the ward and walked in. As soon as he entered, the strong smell of disinfectant entered his nose. "Uncle Zhao, you have to avenge me." At this time, Qin Fen, who was lying on the bed and sulking, heard the sound of the door opening. He saw who came in at a glance. His eyes lit up and he shouted loudly, "Revenge? What revenge? Don't forget why your father asked you to come to the United States. This is Miami, not the imperial capital. You can do whatever you want." Looking at Qin Fen in front of him, Counselor Zhao said angrily, "Ah." Hearing Counselor Zhao's words, Qin Fen couldn't help but be speechless. He often forgot that he was no longer in China but abroad. No matter how powerful his family was, they couldn't reach the United States. Take it as a lesson this time. It's useless to get beaten up. If you sue the other party, at most they will be detained for a few days and then come out to do community service for a few days. After all, you guys started it first. Sai, it's really shameful. You guys started it first, but you haven't beaten anyone. Seeing that Qin Fen was silent, Counselor Zhao walked to his bed and looked down at him condescendingly. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. If it weren't for the kindness of this guy's father and the fact that his family was still in China, he really didn't want to talk to him. The best ending for this kind of second-generation rich kid was to eat peanuts in China. "Uncle Zhao, I can't. I've never been wronged like this in my life. No matter what, I can't take this lying down." Qin Fen couldn't take it anymore when he heard that Counselor Zhao wanted him to swallow his pride. After all, he had never been wronged like this. He couldn't take it lying down. You have to swallow it even if you can't. Otherwise you'll be sent back to China. Now, the video at the beach shows very clearly that it was your people who made the first move. You should be thanking the gods that they didn't kill you. If you returned to China, you would be dead by now. Hearing Qin Fen still shouting, Counselor Zhao's face became even uglier. Does this guy think I'm here to play? Why don't we buy that video? Then we can sue him, right? Qin Feng's expression changed when he heard Counselor Zhao's words. Even though he was the one who made the first move, it was impossible for him to admit defeat just like that. Do you know how big of a crime it is to change evidence and bribe witnesses in America? If you want to die, don't drag me down. I've said what I wanted to say. You'd better stay here and recuperate. Once you've recovered, go to Panama and never come back. After glaring fiercely at Qin Fen, Counselor Zhao was no longer in the mood to continue chatting with him. With a wave of his hand, Counselor Zhao left Qin Feng's ward, leaving behind Qin Fen with a sinister expression on his face. Regardless of what the natural-born dragon wanted to do, Jiang Hai and the others rested for the night. The next morning they drove to the Medical Research Institute mentioned by Shanti Clive. After all, this was the reason why Jiang Hai and the others had come here. However, on the way, Jiang Hai kept feeling that yesterday's incident wouldn't be resolved so easily. "Are you still worried about that person from yesterday?" Marian, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, asked Jiang Hai quietly when she saw Jiang Hai's expression. Actually, after yesterday's incident, everyone in the car wasn't too calm. That guy suffered such a big loss. According to my understanding of those rich people in Wuxia, they won't just let it go. Hearing Marian's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile as he drove. This is America. It's not a place where they can do whatever they want. Jiang, aren't you overthinking things? Although Jiang Hai and Marian's voices weren't loud, Aphrodite, who was sitting behind Jiang Hai, heard it clearly. She couldn't help but lean forward. A pair of slender arms gently wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck, pulling herself as close to Jiang Hai as possible, and said softly, "Yeah, I'm just afraid that these guys won't play by the rules." Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai also rubbed his eyebrows. "Although I don't know how things will develop, Jiang, you can ask your wife. Didn't she say that she is still very powerful in Wuxia? Check this guy's background. Didn't you teach us that only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win 100 battles?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, De Lian, who was in the back, also said at this time. When he heard what she said, Jiang Hai remembered that it wasn't like he didn't have anyone in the country. In fact, Jiang Hai is still not used to asking others for help when something happens. Compared with asking others, he is more inclined to solve it himself. But now, Daliana's words reminded him that asking Qi Li shouldn't be considered as asking for help, right? Jiang Hai immediately picked up the Bluetooth headset in the car, found Qi Li's phone and dialed it. There is a 13-hour time difference between the eastern United States and China. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning for Jiang Hai and it's already 9 o'clock in the evening for China. Qi Li, who had been busy all day, has returned home. In recent days she has been very busy, but her life is very fulfilling. First, because she temporarily solved the problem with Jiang Hai. Second, because she found a good way to attack her opponents. Seeing that her Western restaurant is gradually being renovated, she has begun to look for a chef, and she also feels that in family seems to be getting more and more anxious. Today she returned home after a busy day. Looking at this school district house in the second ring road of the imperial capital, which is envied by countless people, Qi didn't feel anything. The empty house really lacks the feeling of home. Although it's smaller than Jiang Hai's house, it's also less lively than Jiang Hai's house. Should I also raise some small animals? Forget it, I won't come back for a long time when I'm busy. When I come back it will have become a mummy. Helplessly lying on the sofa, Qi laughed at herself. To be honest, she really likes the life in Jiang Hai's house. There is no pressure. She breathes fresh air every day. When she is free she can go to the beach to bask in the sun, she can go horseback riding, she can go fishing. If she wants to go shopping she can drive directly to Boston, where there are the most complete brands in the world. She can buy whatever she wants and it's also cheap. She eats the best ingredients, top beef, huge lobsters and nutritious deep-sea fish. Moreover, Jiang Hai is still making wine recently. When the time comes she can drink a glass of wine produced in her own manner. This kind of life is very beautiful. Unfortunately, she didn't see through Jiang Hai earlier. If she didn't know in Jiangwu but Jiang Hai, then she wouldn't be able to see through him. If she and Jiang Hai were in the United States now, they would live very well and comfortably. Just as Qi recalled that night, when Jiang Hai held her away from the mountain lion, her heart jumped for no reason, and a trace of red slowly climbed to her face. But at this moment, a mobile phone ringtone interrupted her thoughts. Originally, she thought it was a work problem, but she didn't expect to look down and find that the person who called was the one she was thinking about just now. Is this telepathy? Looking at the name flashing on the screen, Qi gently bit her lips, but she still picked up the phone and put it to her ear. Hello? Jiang Hai? It's so late, why did you think of calling me? As the saying goes, what you think is reflected in your words. Now Qi voice is indeed much softer than usual. Jiang Hai on the other side of the phone can't help but be stunned. Nothing, are you sick? After a while, Jiang Hai asked in a low voice on the other side of the phone. Oh no, I'm just a little tired. Recently, I have been busy with the decoration of the Western restaurant. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi also realized that her state was not quite right, so she immediately patted her face and returned to her original state. Oh, since you are tired, then I won't disturb you anymore. I just came to ask you something. Do you know a second generation in China named Qinfen? Hearing Qi words, Jiang Hai asked her. Qinfen? Why do you mention him? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi froze for a moment. In her mind, there appeared a sloppy guy who thought that the heavens were the boss and he was the boss. This is the case. I brought Delina and the others to Miami for treatment. Hearing Qi curious words, Jiang Hai briefly explained the story. Of course, he wisely avoided the part where he put on sunscreen. He didn't want to talk about it. Miami? He escaped to that place. This Qinfen is indeed a second generation in Wuxia, a very famous second generation, but recently, his situation is not very good. Hearing that Jiang Hai beat this guy up, Qi felt a little relieved in her heart. This Qinfen actually had some grudges with Qi and the Qi family. The grudge with the Qi family was because Qinfen's father was originally a superior figure in the Yin family, so the Qi family and Qinfen were enemies. The grudge with Qi was naturally because of Qi's beauty. This guy appeared in front of Qi more than once, wanting to show off his arrogance. Fortunately, although he was retarded, he was not retarded to the point of having any bad intentions towards the president of a company with a market value of tens of billions, especially when Qi didn't go to bars and didn't have any bad habits. But this didn't stop Qi from hating him. Now that she heard that Jiang Hai beat him up, Qi was very happy. Then she told Jiang Hai what she knew. Hearing Qi's introduction, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. It seemed that this Qinfen was indeed not a good person. But at the same time he relaxed. At least this guy couldn't find trouble with him in the government. Chapter 285. This man named Qin Feng's father was Qin Tian, a high-ranking official in the imperial city. He was considered one of the top second-tier leaders in the country and held real power. Qin Feng, on the other hand, was a famous hedonist in the imperial city. Half a month ago he ran over someone with his car. The other party's family was quite powerful. If he didn't settle the matter privately, he would have to pay with his life. Qin Tai, and used his connections to escape. This was why he chose Miami instead of Los Angeles. It was easier to escape from Miami. Miami was located in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, the Sargasso Sea and the Caribbean Sea. He could easily go to any country from here. The lawless Mexico, Cuba, the Bahamas and even further the countries in South America could be visited. It could be said that it was a place where he could attack or retreat. Now, he had only been in the United States for 2 days and he was causing trouble again. This time he was causing trouble for Jiang Hai. But soon he wouldn't be able to pull it off because Chile also had a grudge against him. Although Chile couldn't reach that far, it wouldn't be a problem for her to inform Qin Tai, Anne's enemies in the country. As long as they caught Qin Tai, and they might be able to get some information about Qin Tai, and at that time, it would be a heavy blow to the An family. Jiang Hai wasn't good at scheming. He was famous for being naive. Since Chile was willing to take over this matter, it was the best outcome for him. Jiang Hai put down his worries and hung up the phone. He continued to drive to the place Shenty Clive told him about. After driving for about half an hour, a large white building appeared in front of him. It should be here, Jiang Hai muttered to himself as he looked at the address Xanthi told him. From afar he saw a sign hanging on the building's outer wall. On it was a string of English words, Bernice Health Clinic. However, Jiang Hai knew that although it was called a clinic, it didn't usually treat patients. Most of them were doing research here. The main research direction was towards a disease that was claimed to be incurable, albinism. Although albinism still couldn't be cured here, there had been a lot of research results. At least albinos could live like normal people without exposure to the sun. This was a great progress. Of course, although the study of albinism was the most important, it was also very authoritative about other medical problems. Otherwise, SH-20 Clive wouldn't have recommended Jiang Hai to come here. The car quickly arrived at the front of the research institute. As the car steadily stopped in the parking lot of the research institute, Jiang Hai and the 10 girls got off the car and walked towards the research institute. "What can I do for you?" Seeing Jiang Hai walking over with a group of young and beautiful beauties, the security guard here couldn't help but be a little surprised. This was a place to see a doctor, not a beauty contest. What were these guys doing here? "We're here to see a doctor. I've already called Dr. Bernice here." Hearing the security guard's words, Jiang Hai also said politely. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, the security guard was still a little uncertain. So he asked Jiang Hai to wait here for a while. After he went back to make a phone call with the internal line, he asked Jiang Hai to wait for a while. About 10 minutes later, a woman came out of the research institute. This woman looked only 24 or 25 years old. She was definitely younger than Jiang Hai. She was obviously Asian. She didn't wear makeup on her face, but she wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. Her long hair was meticulously combed behind her head and tied into a ponytail. There was no expression on her face. Except for coldness, there was only coldness. She wore a white coat and a pair of high heels. When she walked, she really had a strong aura. However, when Jiang Hai saw her, he unexpectedly found that this person seemed to be a little familiar. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. In his eyes, he felt that he looked familiar. It was very likely that it had been too long since he had seen an Asian. This could be a kind of misperception, just like how Wuxia people did not look much when they saw foreigners. And the reason why Asians looked similar to Asians was one of the reasons, so he didn't care. However, when this woman saw Jiang Hai, she was also stunned for a moment, and her face flashed with deep doubts. "Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. You must be Dr. Bernice. We just talked on the phone." Seeing the doubts on this woman's face, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. After all, he had something to ask of her. He took the initiative to walk over and shook hands with her. "Hello, Mr. Jiang. Sandy has already told me about you. Let's go in now. There are a lot of things to check, so we have to hurry." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice also calmed down. She didn't introduce herself, but continued to speak to Jiang Hai in English. Then she led Jiang Hai into the research institute. However, when she turned her head, the puzzled expression on her face became even more intense. Although the woman's tone was a bit cold, Jiang Hai didn't care. After greeting the girls, he walked into the research institute. After walking in, he discovered that this place was really big. Moreover, almost all of the products here were cutting-edge technology. The ground of this research institute was divided into 2 parts. There were normal walking paths on both sides, but in the middle there was a flat rolling ladder, just like an airport rolling ladder. In front of each department, there was a stop point for people to walk. This was convenient for people who couldn't walk very well. In addition, the walls on both sides were not like the reinforced concrete walls of ordinary hospitals. Maybe the main body was like this, but outside the walls, there was an integrated LCD touchscreen showing different things. For example, the research topic of this research institute, all the doctors, nurses, security guards, and patients living here, and the situation at each time. In addition, there was an overall map. On the ceiling, some pictures were constantly being played, such as fields, grasslands, sunlight, and so on. After all, many of the patients here had never seen sunlight before. As soon as he walked in, this research institute gave Jiang Hai a special surreal feeling, as if he was watching a sci-fi movie. If Jiang Hai felt this way, then there's no need to mention the feeling he gave to Daliana and the others. When these girls walked in, their eyes never left the wall. Along with Bernice, they stepped into the middle elevator and walked forward slowly. Along the way, Bernice might be thinking about something, or she might not be good at communicating with others, so she almost didn't make any sound. As for Jiang Hai and the others, they had no time to communicate with her because they were still studying the technology here. We're here. After walking in the elevator for about 2 minutes, Bernice, who was in the front, said her first sentence. Then she walked down from a gap in the elevator. Jiang Hai and the others naturally followed her and walked into the room next to the gap. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but make a wow sound. This was because at this time, in front of him was a completely white space just like the white in the movies. It was pure white, from the ceiling to the floor to the middle to the walls, everything was white, there was no other color. In addition, there was only one machine in this room, plus 2 people. These 2 people were obviously doctors here. At this time they were recording something. Hearing the sound, they couldn't help but turn their heads. After seeing Bernice, they nodded to her. We have a total of 6 tests today. Here is a blood test, a full set of biochemical tests, an ultrasound, chest x-ray, ear, nose, and throat examination, which are the most important ones. Also, internal medicine and surgery. Although you were recommended by Sandy, I also have to think about the reputation of our center. These girls must be very healthy, then I will give you the certificate you need. Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice said coldly. It was obvious that she wasn't discussing with Jiang Hai, nor was she explaining to Jiang Hai. She was just giving orders. This was her place, and Jiang Hai didn't care about doing these things. It was also good for these girls to have a physical examination, so he just nodded and said to the girls behind him. Hearing that they were going to draw blood, the girls were more or less afraid. But after all, these people were not young, so they didn't need to be scared like children. Moreover, the blood was drawn by machine, so it was very safe and there was no pain, so it didn't matter. Soon, the girls' blood samples had been drawn, and the 2 doctors here began to get busy. After Bernice told them, she took everyone out of the pure white room and went to the other side to do an ultrasound. This room was almost the same as the one in the room. It was also pure white, but the doctors changed from male to female. Although in the eyes of doctors, there was no difference between male and female patients, in the eyes of patients, there was a difference between male and female doctors. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Bernice arranged all the doctors to be female doctors this time. After the ultrasound, they would do the chest x-ray. After the chest x-ray, they would do the ear, nose, and throat examination. The most important thing here was to check the throat. After this examination, the internal medicine and surgery were actually not a big deal. Although they didn't need to line up or wait along the way, it was already past 12 o'clock when they finished all the examinations. Chapter 286. It's noon now. Why don't I treat you to a meal? The examination had been in progress. Unknowingly, it was already past 12 o'clock. Seeing that the last examination was over, Jiang Hai still needed to wait here for the results of the examination to come out, so he thought for a while and said something to Bernice in front of him. At the same time, he took out his mobile phone and prepared to order takeout. Of course, Jiang Hai's so-called takeout naturally couldn't be ordinary takeout. He was going to order it at the hotel where he lived. No need, we have a cafeteria here. The food is not bad. If you are interested, you can try it together. Before Jiang Hai finished speaking, Bernice had already rejected Jiang Hai's proposal and said faintly. He doesn't know why, but this Bernice always seems to have a trace of hostility towards Jiang Hai. Oh then, okay. After listening to Bernice's words, Jiang Hai couldn't say anything, so he nodded with a smile. Then a group of 11 people, led by Bernice, took the rolling ladder and came to a huge room. Far away, Jiang Hai smelled the aroma of food here. Obviously, it was the time to eat here. Following Bernice, Jiang Hai and others quickly walked into this hall. This hall was the cafeteria of this diagnosis and treatment center. It looked no different from an ordinary cafeteria. There were several windows, one for dishes, one for rice, one for porridge, one for desserts and drinks. It was just that the people eating here, in addition to the doctors and nurses here, there were also patients here. Jiang Hai looked around. In addition to the room being white, the tables and chairs were all white, and the staff were all dressed in white. The patients here were also dressed in white. They were all wearing white hospital gowns, and their skin was whiter than the whitest white people. At the same time they also had white hair. Each and every one of them looked just like the snow elves in a fairy tale world. They blended perfectly with the scenery around them. Feeling that someone had walked in here, these people's eyes looked at Jiang Hai and others immediately. When they discovered that Jiang Hai and the others were actually ordinary people from the outside world, their eyes revealed a trace of curiosity. Jiang Hai was also sizing up these people. He didn't know if it was because this institution was established relatively late, or it could be because the treatment here was expensive, so the older people no longer wanted to come here for treatment. Therefore, the patients admitted here were not very old. The older ones were in their 20s and the younger ones looked like they were in their teens. Generally speaking, albinism did not affect one's lifespan, but they could not come into contact with the sun outside. Therefore, generally speaking, people with this disease would definitely look a little different from ordinary people, such as their eyes. But who knows what the result will be after going there. On the bow of the ship, the Virgin Mary, which was originally made of metal, can no longer be seen at this time. Only a lot of shellfish can be seen parasitizing there. There are also some plants that Jiang Hai can't name. Looking at the appearance of the ship, Jiang Hai feels that the cold wind in his head seems to be getting stronger and stronger. The whole ship gives people the feeling of a ghost ship. Well, this is a ghost ship to begin with. Jiang Hai deliberately looked at the ship when he was descending. The ship is just hanging on the edge of the cliff. Although he is not sure if the ship can withstand the impact of his fall, Jiang Hai is not prepared to try. If it can't withstand the impact and falls, won't he have to live more than 2,000 meters downstream? That would be too tiring. So he is prepared to lie down on the cliffs on both sides first, then slowly walk to the ship. But the moment Jiang Hai shines the headlight on the cliffs on both sides, his scalp feels like it is exploding. The hair on his whole body tightens in an instant, and his hair stands on end. His whole back gives a dense feeling of disgust. He almost can't hold the engine in his hand. Fortunately, he is a brave person. He forcibly grabbed the engine and turned it off, preventing it from falling. Jiang Hai swallowed another mouthful of saliva. He resisted the disgust and looked at the cliffs on both sides. Under the illumination of his headlight, the cliffs on both sides are densely packed with countless insects. Looking at these insects, Jiang Hai subconsciously stopped in the middle. He doesn't know what to do. The most important thing was that these things were more than 300 years ago, nearly 400 years ago. Thinking with his thumb, Jiang Hai knew that he was rich. Although there were some troubles, in front of these things, Jiang Hai felt that these troubles were nothing. Raising cattle was indeed profitable, but after paying taxes, it would be good if he could keep more than 1 billion yuan. Now that he had quietly produced so many antiques, he couldn't help but chuckle. Although the antiques of the European Middle Ages were not as good as those of the Ming Dynasty, these were still antiques. A gold coin, if sold according to the price of gold, was definitely worthless, but if it was a gold coin from 300 years ago, then it would be at least 10 times more valuable. At this time Jiang Hai had so many in front of him, he really felt that luck was waving at him. There is still one more warehouse, I want to take a look. Then he grabbed a lot of gold coins and threw them into the bag he brought. He needed to identify these things first, and then think about how to get the things in the ship into his hands. But before going up, he had to take a look at the last warehouse so he could rest assured. Ignoring the giant squid that was still twisting there, Jiang Hai walked into the last warehouse. This time he didn't touch anything and this room was a lot emptier. The whole room was not smaller than the previous one, but at this time there were only 2 boxes. Jiang Hai swam over curiously. After confirming that there was nothing else here, Jiang Hai first smashed one of the boxes, which contained a set of armor. This set of armor was already black, but there was still a faint trace of gold, which made Jiang Hai couldn't help but think of the gold coins he picked up in the beginning. The color was not much different from this, but this one seemed to be redder, which meant that the gold content was not enough. The style of this armor was also very strange. It was the upper body, or to be exact, the whole body, because the lower body was a skirt. However, this skirt was not like the skirt of ancient Chinese battle armor. Instead, it was more like a ballet skirt. The waist of the upper body was also very thin, and the neck collar was also very high. This was the only thing in the entire box. Jiang Hai couldn't help but be confused. Is this really armor? Although he was a little curious, Jiang Hai still put this armor aside for the time being, and then smashed the other box. But as soon as this box was opened, Jiang Hai had some regrets, because he should have opened this box gently. If one of the things inside was broken, then he would really be distressed because at this time, there was a pair of vases in front of him. The base color of these two vases was white, and there were blue patterns on them. Jiang Hai could clearly see that there was a dragon pattern and a phoenix pattern on the vase.